can you just confirm that? There we go. Okay. Good evening. So I want to say a little bit about how this trip came about. I was I continued to learn with someone named Shalom Goldman, and Shalom is used to be here in the Durham area, and he is my chavruta. And when we have questions that come up about various things related to either etymologies or particularly Egyptian stuff, we reach out to a scholar named Gary Rensburg, who is both a biblical scholar and an Egyptologist at Rutgers University. And a while ago, I was learning and saw that he was leading a trip with the Biblical Archaeological Society to Egypt. And I sort of said to myself, wow, if there's any time that I'm going to go to Egypt, that is the person who I want to go to Egypt with. Reached out to the Biblical Archaeological Society. They were happy to have us bring a group from Bethel. And so we put the word out there in the fall and had some wonderful interest. And so we had a group of people from Bethel. And we were part of a larger group from the Biblical Archaeological Society. I think there were a total of 35 or so people, and we were 15 to 18 of those. And so we had a wonderful trip. Another thing that was a motivation for me is that there is a woman in our congregation who is on the call, although I don't see her camera on, named Salwa. Who is wonderful and is doing some studies with me as part of the conversion process. And Salwa grew up in Alexandria, Egypt, pretty amazingly, and very close to the synagogue in Alexandria. And so I talked with her, and the way I'm going to begin is actually I'm going to show you in a minute. Hi, Salwa. I'm going to show you in a minute my trip to Alexandria, which was a pre-trip. So the trip officially started on Sunday in the evening. There were some people who showed up early and just took some time to get acclimated, and they visited some museums in Cairo. I landed on Thursday evening and took had a driver take me from Cairo north to Alexandria, and I got there late in the evening, and then relaxed, and I spent the day touring in Alexandria on Friday. And I'm just going to show you. I'm going to start by giving you a little view from the beautiful hotel, from the top of the hotel that Salwa helped me to find, and from the rooftop, you can see the Mediterranean Sea. I don't know if you can hear the honking. There's always a lot of honking. And then we had this beautiful rooftop view and a little breakfast area, which was just wonderful. So I got started. I got my trip started in Alexandria. One of the things which I'll point out is that a lot of the architecture in Alexandria was developed in the 19th century and the early 20th century. And there was a person who sort of, and there were many French and Italian people who lived in Alexandria and helped to do a lot of the building of modern Alexandria. And so this is not typical Arab architecture. It's not typical architecture of the Arab world, but you can see that there's some beautiful facades, and I think this wonderful, in particular, that chocolate factory at the very bottom is quite yummy. When I was in Alexandria, one of the things that I toured was called the Catacombs of Qom el Shakafa, I think is the name. It should say there, Shukafa, which means the word Qom el Shukafa, and Salwa, you can always jump in and correct me if I get something wrong. but I think it means a heap of shards. And this area in Alexandria was known as a neighborhood, a heap of shards, because they would find lots of shards of pottery all around it. And they didn't, for a long time, they didn't know why they were finding shards of pottery until they discovered the catacombs. And the catacombs were buried underneath. Catacombs are an ancient graveyard, and the reason that there were heaps of pottery is, well, here this is a picture of the catacombs, of how they would lower the bodies down into the grave area, and you can see some of the holes as they bring it all the way to the bottom. And I'm gonna do this in reverse order. When you get to the bottom, in the catacombs, there's an area that they found, which kind of, well, now I'm going to show you what it is, right? So you can see that there are these wide benches, and if you go back one, you'll see that this is an artistic depiction of what was happening there. This was essentially a place underground in the catacombs to have a meal. And what you would do is you would bring a meal, and you would have it with your deceased ancestors, as it were. And in the same way as Jews, when we go to the cemetery, we wash our hands either when we leave the cemetery or when we come back into the home, because we don't want to sort of bring some of the death from the cemetery back into our homes. They would bring dishes, and in the olden days, they didn't have paper or plastic disposables. So what they would do is they would just break the dishes that they had used for these meals that they would have in the catacombs. They would break them and leave them in the area, and that's why the area around the catacombs was called a heap of shards, right? Because there were all these shards that people would break from their dishes after having these meals. If you ever wonder what we're supposed to be doing at Passover, when we drink a cup of wine, you know how one of the four questions says, Halayla hazeh kulanu misubin, all of us, most nights we don't drink wine reclining, but on Passover we do. This is actually, it's not just a lean to the right, or a lean to the left that the rabbis had in mind. The idea was that you were actually lying down, and you were having this sort of talk feast, and this gives you a sense of what that might have looked like, and this, as a vision. The thing to remember about Alexandria is that, of course, it was founded by Alexander the Great during I think it was about 330 BCE, and so it really is a city that that has Greek customs and Roman customs sort of built into it from the very beginning. And here's another rendition that my tour guide gave to me. And what you find in the catacombs, so this is something that you will only see in the catacombs of Alexandria. If you look at the bottom of this statue, you can see that the feet are standing, in this left foot forward, right foot back stance, which is typical of Egyptian, Egyptian depictions. But if you look at the top of this statue, it is not an Egyptian look, right? That is a Greek or Roman look, in terms of the hair on the top. And what you have is a combination of Egyptian practices and Egyptian figures with Greek and Roman figures, and that's something that you only see in Alexandria, as in the 330 and BCE, and afterward you had this mixture of forms. So I had a wonderful tour. This is another, gives you a little better example of a full figure, again with the Egyptian stance, and then you can start to see some of the other things that we saw down in the catacombs. These are the burial, some of the burial chambers it's a remarkable complex. Um, just by the way, before I keep going, I'm just going to say that I'm not going to do a full explanation of everything that we see. I'm going to send you our scholar was Gary Rensburg. He has a Facebook page, and he put together extremely accurate and good descriptions of everything that we see. I'm going to give you a few pieces. First of all, the Alexandria piece, I'll give you what I can from my own visit, and then I'm going to tell some stories, and maybe towards the end, just invite any other participants to share any other any stories that they have. So after going to the catacombs, I went to Pompieri's Pillar, which is this remarkable, what's left of a remarkable temple complex in Alexandria. Hold on, I have to switch albums now. Okay, now to the other album. So this is Pompieri's Pillar and me, and one of the many sphinxes that are there. The next thing is this is the fortress, I guess what would be called the Pharaoh's Fortress. So what this is a fortress that was made from the stones and from the ruins of what's going on? Is that me? Whoops. From the fortress. Let's see. Okay, I'll come back to that in a second. The fortress of the ruins from the Lighthouse of Alexandria. So the Lighthouse of Alexandria is one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. This figure sort of gives you a sense of what just the doors to the lighthouse looked like. I think I have a photograph. Oh no, that's not that. So I not in the slideshow, but I have it was a 40 stories high. And I'm going to show you a little video from the museum that they have in this area, because essentially the lighthouse collapsed from earthquakes in, I think, the 12th or 13th century. And most of it collapsed into the Mediterranean around the lighthouse. The fortress that I showed you was then built. This is just the bottom part of the fortress, but it was basically 2 or 3 times high as that base structure, and it collapsed. But now they've undertaken here you can see, maybe not so well, but they have a video of what it looks like under the water in the Mediterranean, and they've mapped. They've started to map all of the pieces from the lighthouse underwater, and so you can see here, clearly pillars, and they've found some arches, and there are thousands and thousands of pieces of the Lighthouse of Alexandria under the water that have been very well preserved in the Mediterranean. And there's a big project underway for mapping it. You can see in the video that I sort of took here. Since 2012, a research program has aimed to model the entire site using various 3D modeling technologies. So that was a fascinating thing to see. I'm going to share. So I then went on the main street in Alexandria, and I saw this store. And you'll see the date here is October 6th, which is after October 7th, it was just very jarring for me to walk through somewhere in Egypt and see an October 6th. I said, what? So I asked my tour guide, what is this? And October 6th is the date that the Egyptian, that modern Egypt associates with what we call the Yom Kippur War. The war in 1973, when Egypt attacked Israel on Yom Kippur, the English date was October 6th. the people who were in Egypt with us may remember that the neighborhood that our first hotel in was called the October 6th neighborhood. It's a date that's celebrated in modern Egyptian culture because even though the you know even though there were essentially the war ended with the same boundaries as at the beginning of the war, because of the many casualties that were inflicted and the fact that Israeli troops were driven back for a time, it's seen as a military victory um, in modern in Egyptian culture. And what my tour guide said to me is that many Egyptians are sort of unaware that Egypt did not get the Sinai back immediately after the war, but actually, as we know, it was returned as part of the peace negotiations in with Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin in the late 70s. But in sort of the mindset of many Egyptians, the Sinai was won back on the October 6th war. And so you have this is some sort of souvenir shop or something like that, which is commemorating October 6th. I got up in the in the evening. I walked along the waterfront. You can see one of the vendors, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful place to go for a walk. And I not only went for a walk at sunset, but got up in the morning and also went for a run along there, which was great. So and I was there during the full moon, as you can see. My tour also included a tour of the Alexandria Library. So Alexandria was famous for its ancient library, which burned down, but the University of Alexandria constructed a pretty extraordinary library, and the outside wall has figures from languages all around the world as a sort of a gesture towards the history of the Alexandria Library. It's a beautiful architectural building that sort of welcomes in natural light, but also keeps direct sunlight out, because as you can imagine, direct sunlight in the Middle East makes everything very, very hot. This is the inside, the reading room. From what I understand, it is the largest reading room in the world. And you can see that it goes down floor by floor by floor. I think it goes maybe 9 or 10 stories down. I was particularly, and then one of the things that they have in the library is this, this is in the middle of the library. It's this big piece, and you can see that there's a carpet on it. I'm going to fast forward for a second. This is me in front of the carpet. The carpet in Islam, if you go back each year, this is the Kaaba in Mecca, and the Kaaba, this rectangle that is the center of pilgrimage, is covered with a carpet, which is made each year. And then after the pilgrimage for Ramadan, which is beginning tonight, after that, then pieces of the carpet are given as gifts to various people in the Muslim world. And at one point in one of the years, part of this carpet was gifted to somebody in the Alexandrian Egyptian community, and he donated it to the library. So this carpet essentially was in Mecca on the Kaaba for Ramadan at one point. There's also this sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but this little tent. Interestingly, the tent used to be, the carpet actually, I think, used to be made in in Egypt and was brought from Egypt to Saudi Arabia. I don't think it's made there anymore, but there are photos of this, of this being brought. There used to be a whole parade and a cultural parade around it. I checked. There's not a big collection in terms of Judaism in the Alexandria Library, but they did have a modern Hebrew grammar, and a few things about the Hebrew language. There wasn't what I would consider a good library in terms of the Israeli-Arab conflict or anything like that, but there was a little bit. So one of the things that we saw a lot of were obelisks. And you should know that there's an obelisk in Central Park. In Central Park, New York. This is a picture of the obelisk in Central Park. For those of you who know Central Park pretty well, the Great Lawn is over here, and the obelisk with the Egyptian writing is pictured here. And it used to be, it was brought from Egypt, and I had this picture of the obelisk crossing the main drive in Central Park, and it came from the waterfront in Alexandria. Obviously, it came first from from Egypt itself, from the south of Egypt. It was brought to the waterfront in Alexandria, and then it was eventually taken, I think, by the French and then eventually the British. It made its way to one of them made its way to Paris, and then another one is in New York. And this is the hotel that I stayed in. Again, you can see the European architecture, and Alexandria was a very European, had a lot of European influences. Last part of my tour in Alexandria was visiting the one of the churches for Saint Mark. So Mark in the New Testament travels to Alexandria as part of his journeys around the ancient world, and so you have four itineraries of Saint Mark the apostle, and the people who were our tour guides were Coptic Christians. Copt Christians are essentially Egyptian Christians. Their Christianity goes back to the time of Saint Mark, to the time of the New Testament as well. Itself, Copt Christians make up about 15% of the population, and unfortunately, Egypt has struggled like much of the much of the Muslim world with Muslim extremism, and you can see that in 2017, actually right around Easter, there was an attack. Fortunately, the bomber was prevented from getting into the church itself. But there were a number of police officers and a number of worshipers who were murdered on Palm Sunday, and there's a commemoration of that outside the church itself. And this is just a picture of the Church of Saint Mark, and I believe that the lion is sort of this figure associated with Saint Mark, and you can see here on the right side a picture, sort of a figure of the lighthouse of Alexandria, and how it was depicted in the church mosaics. And here's another beautiful mosaic from the church, and again the depiction of Alexandria and the lighthouse. Just to give you a little sense of some of the cultural things to navigate there, my tour guide showed me a meme that was, in the social media feed. And Salwa, you can help me with my translation, but it says something like, don't take a picture with a Christmas tree, right? That it's sort of not appropriate. This is more Muslim extremists sort of saying, it's not a cultural expression to be photographed with a Christmas tree, and you can feel sort of the the struggle with liberalism versus and tolerance, which is certainly what the Copt Christians as a minority want, and many other Egyptians want, versus some of the more conservative elements. Last few things from Alexandria is there used to be a Jewish population of 30 to 50,000 Jews. It was a very big, during the 20th century, the early part of the 20th century, very big Jewish population. There is one synagogue that I'm going to show you, the Eliyahu Hanavi synagogue, that's been restored, that the Sisi government has paid to restore. But there are a whole bunch of other synagogues that are owned by the Jewish community, but right now there basically is no Jewish community that's there, but the buildings are there, and you can see. So this is in downtown Alexandria, and you can see a couple of Jewish stars up on the building. Here's a little wider picture, and this is, you can see that it's just among some of the shops. And I took a selfie. I needed to the police officers do not like you to take pictures of them, but I wanted to get a sense of this, so I took a selfie with the police officer in the background. And essentially, the synagogue is across the square, and so the synagogue itself was, still had to be secured, even though it's an empty building now, but it has identification, as a Jewish building. At the waterfront, there is a statue to Muhammad. I'm going to forget the last name, but he's essentially the father of modern Egypt.
Saad Zaghloul.
Thank you, Salwa. And he's the father of modern Egypt, who sort of brought Alexandria back and helped to modernize it, and really create it into a bustling and amazing city that, Salwa, if you want to add anything else before I move on from Alexandria. But, he really, if I'm correct, helped to revitalize and build it into an amazing city. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, he was credited for liberating women, because women in the 18th century, early 19th century were like Iran now, and he is the one who actually liberated women from that.
And just helped it to be sort of a quite liberal and multicultural city during that time. So so the last thing that I'll share is I went to the Eliyahu Hanavi synagogue. So this is the inside of the synagogue. To get in there, I needed Salwa's help, and we connected with there are very specific times, and you have to have a passport, and but I was able to get in. This has been refurbished by the Sisi government. There are some effort paid for, and there's some efforts at refurbishing certain synagogues to try and preserve the Jewish history of Egypt, because really, as there have been Jews in Egypt almost continually since the time of the Exodus. I did a shiur all about this, but even though we left Egypt, we kind of quickly went back, and there have been Jews there for a long time. This synagogue dates, I think, to the at least to the 10th or 11th century. And you can see many synagogues, I just want to point this out to you, will have little sandboxes in them, because that's where people light Shabbat candles. So you would walk to synagogue, and you would say the Mincha prayer, and then light Shabbat candles, and you can see that here. In the front of the ark, I'm going to scoot forward a little bit. Here you can see a picture. On the left-hand side is the curtain of the ark, and then you see these tzedakah boxes. Okay, and there's two over here, and then there's two on the other side, and so the ark is surrounded by essentially places for people to give money to support the community. I brought a gift from Salwa. I brought a gift from our community as well, and they collected for various things. I'm going to show you. This one says Beit HaCholim, which when I first saw it, I said to myself, "Oh, that must be, for some sort of society visiting the sick." It would be Bikur Cholim, but I don't know. I thought maybe it was Beit Cholim, but then I wondered. Beit HaCholim essentially means the hospital, and I was curious, and I found out. That there was a Jewish hospital in Alexandria. It was established by some of the wealthier Jews in Alexandria. It no longer functions as such. It didn't serve only Jews, but much like Sinai Hospital, Cedar Sinai in Los Angeles, or there are many hospitals around the United States and the world. There was a Jewish hospital in Alexandria as well, and so let's see. Let me scoot forward a little bit. In the Eliyahu Hanavi synagogue, you see there's dozens of Ner Tamids. These are the Ner Tamids, the eternal lights, the eternal lamps that have been collected from all of the synagogues around Alexandria. Okay, so that empty building that I showed you, the Ner Tamid is not still in that building. It was brought from there and from many other synagogues. So each one of these represents either a synagogue or a chapel in a synagogue, but from around Alexandria, and they're all adorning this one ark. And I was not able to look in the ark, but from what I understand, in the ark there are 25 or 30 Sifrei Torah that have been collected from around Alexandria, from around there. I want to just do one more thing. You can see these two other collection boxes. I think I have. That's a picture of the Ark with the Ten Commandments and some other psukim. I think I have a close up. Yes. So this one says Shemen Lamaor, which means oil for the lamps, and it's a general term in rabbinic literature for collecting. For the maintenance of the synagogue. You can see the one on the left says Tzedakah Aniyim, and in French, I believe, for poverty, for those who are poor. And then, yes, this is the one that I wanted to show you. So I puzzled over this. My French is good enough to know that École de la
Communauté. De la communauté, yeah.
Thank you.
That was my school, École de la Communauté Israélite, yes.
Amazing, right? Mm-hmm. So it's school, but in the Hebrew letters, what this says is madras, okay? And a madras is also, it's sort of the name for where you would go to study the Quran, right? A Muslim, it's Judeo-Arabic madras. And then I didn't know what this word is here on the left. And so I wrote to Jack Sasson, and I think I pulled this up. Let me see if I can do this. You can see my email. So I wrote to Jack, and he explained to me the second word is Al-Taifa.
The community, yes. Community.
Of the community. Yeah. Of the community. And so let me go back. So this is the Aleph here is short for Al, and Taifa is of the community. So it's Madras Al-Taifa, École de la Communauté, right? And the school, the community school, right? Which, as you hear, right, that was where Salwa attended. In the synagogue itself, you can see they have preserved some of the ancient synagogues, going back to the 10th century. I believe that there actually was, this may have been the mikveh, and they just sort of kept it there. And you can see that I just took some pictures, a few of them, more, but just of the beautiful stained glass that is in the the synagogue there. And then in the back, right, you can see this sign that they have: in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, in the reign of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, et cetera, et cetera. This was it was dedicated in 2020. Was this restoration project for the synagogue? And this is a little video of the courtyard of the synagogue in Alexandria. Here's the entrance, and that's the entrance, and Salwa's house. I can't remember if I kept going. If you keep going to the right and look down, there's the main street, and her house is just there on the right-hand side. Salwa, we're looking at the back of your house. Is that right? Just towards the end?
The side of it, yes. One side, yes.
Yeah, amazing, right?
Yeah.
So just a wonderful, wonderful connection to have. And then you can see the Star of David, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful structure that was home. And I found this picture, right? If you look at the top, it says Hôpital de la Communauté Nafte Israelite, right? This was the Jewish hospital, right? That was in Alexandria at the beginning of the 20th century, and that we saw the tzedakah box collecting money from it. All right. That was all the stuff, from my personal trip. I realize I've taken up too much time in that, but I'll try and run through some other stuff from the rest of Egypt. We started out seeing some old pyramids. And so this is one of the pyramids that's sort of the most run down. There's Amy Rips and I, and yes, I did start climbing one of the pyramids, and there's just beautiful, beautiful photos. We visited a carpet making thing, and I just want you to see this video and watch her. She does this by hand, and it was just pretty amazing to see the artistry, a whole history of carpet making. We went to the pyramids in Giza, and also to the Grand Egyptian Museum. Here's a little video of our beautiful sunset. I think Sabina just wanted to hang out there for the rest of the trip. She loved the pyramids. Very interesting. They're right next to the city, right? There's really a neighborhood right next to the to the pyramids. I want you to just remember this big hole, okay? Because what we're going to see a little later is in the Grand Egyptian Museum, they found in this big hole right next to the pyramid a giant boat. And the basic idea was that there was all of the burials take place on the west side of the Nile, and there was an idea that there is a underground river that the sun travels underneath the earth to go from the west to the east, and there's an underground river like the River of Hades to the netherworld, and that the pharaoh would need a boat to do this travel in his death. And so they found this wood boat basically in this big hole here next to the pyramids. There's Sabina and me, right? And it was a beautiful sunset. This is a picture of the back of the bus. Right, so we've got Kim Holt and Jonathan and Jennifer and Kim's mom, and we had a great time in the back of the bus. This is the Gem Museum, Grand Egyptian Museum. I encourage you, if you can't go there, at least watch some of the stories about it. It's just huge and remarkable, and the architecture itself is very, very beautiful. And I loved taking some pictures of the architecture. This is one of huge Sphinx, and some of you have heard me talk about this, but one of the things that Gary helped us to really understand is how many of the metaphors in the Bible are based upon are based have an Egyptian context, and so this is probably the clearest one. Many times we say in the Haggadah and in the Torah, it says that God brought the Israelites out of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. And this photograph shows Pharaoh subduing a Semite. Okay, and you can tell that this is a Semite because he's bearded. You can see the difference in the face of the Pharaoh up top and the bearded Semite below. With a strong hand, right? Meaning, there. Look at the sword in the hand up top, and an outstretched arm. And the best way I can explain this is that the Torah was trash talking. The Torah was essentially saying, I, God, am going to do to you, Pharaoh, and the Egyptians, what you, Pharaoh, would do to to Semites and others who you conquered. And so it just gives you a background, the Egyptian background for some of the metaphors and other ideas. And we would see that time after time. In the Grand Egyptian Museum, there were all of the contents of King Tut's tomb. And if you, all of these poles and things like this are gold plated. And what's pretty clear is that the tabernacle, which, by the way, if you're going to join us this week to study with Sicha and Malila Helner Esheb, we're starting our Torah reading, all studying about the tabernacle and the building of the tabernacle in the desert. And the tabernacle was probably based upon structures like this. And when you read about the tabernacle, you go into this excruciating detail about poles and knobs and them fitting together and planks and gold plated. And as Gary would say to us often, the Bible doesn't come with pictures, but Egypt does. And not only does Egypt come with pictures, but it also comes now, because we have the contents of King Tut's tomb, you can see models, right? And you're sort of looking at many, the gold plating as it's described in the Torah. Here's an example of what gold plating looks like. Here's an example of a post fitting into into a hole, which you have described again in Exodus. This is, probably something along the lines of what the ark, was carried on. You have the ark described as being carried on poles. This is a beautiful, let me pause it for a second. So they sort of created in the Grand Egyptian Museum an animation of the hieroglyphs. And one of the scenes portrays Semites, and you can tell that they're Semites again by the beards, arriving to Egypt, with their herds, which should call to mind Jacob and his sons arriving to Egypt after Joseph reveals his identity and taking refuge during the famine. And they sort of, speed this up and show you what it's depicting, and also how the hieroglyphs were made. So let me just play this for a second. And you can tell here, this shows you how the hieroglyphs were done, because we found partially done hieroglyphs. There's Debbie. Hi, Debbie. Right there you are. And then it starts to fill it in, right? They would first draw like that, and then they would fill it in with color like this. So it's a beautiful display. I took a picture of this because it reminded me, think of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Okay, this fabric in the Grand Egyptian Museum, it's just unbelievable to think about. And Gary would explain this to us all the time that, uh, if you think about us going back to the time of the temple, of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, it was destroyed in the year 70. Um, at that time, ancient Egypt had been around for 2,500 more years, right? So what you're looking at, King Tut's tomb, is this fabric is 3,500, 3,700 years old. I mean, it's just remarkable. And, when you think about the multicolored, the Ketonet Pasim, the multicolored or striped coat, here you have an example of that. You also have trumpets that you have described in the Bible, silver trumpets displayed. And then amazingly, in King Tut's tomb in the museum, they have baskets. These baskets were in the tomb, and they date back to the time of essentially the time of Moses. And so I'm not saying that one of these baskets, that Moses was in one of these baskets, but I'm showing you that here are baskets from Egypt from the time of Moses, made from the reeds around the Nile. And so you really get a sense of it probably looked something like this, right? And then it was, as it described in the Bible, it was covered with tar, or pitch to make it waterproof. But when it describes a basket, it's probably describing, right, something like that. And it's just, it's pretty amazing to do. This is just the end of a walking stick, but it gives you, a sense of the way that they would depict an Asiatic or a Semite, with beard. And then this one is a depiction of a Nubian, somebody from the middle of Africa. And then they lay out for you in King Tut's tomb. They had all these different coffins, and it's like a Russian doll, right? That one goes inside the other. You have this is the outside of it. Again, this should echo for you the wings of the cherubim that would protect the ark, and here you have the wings that are serving as protection on the outside of the coffin itself. Here's a close-up of King Tut. This is probably something like what the golden calf, right, looked like, right? This was a depiction, found in King Tut's tomb, and it very well could be like that. And here is, here's another, part of the coffin that was, found in the tomb. There's so much more to say about all of this, about burial practices and stuff like that. Remember I told you about that boat, right? And I showed you the big hole. This is in the Grand Egyptian Museum. They reconstructed the wood. Obviously, it wasn't found exactly like this, and you can see the people. This is a huge, huge boat, right? That was constructed in, ancient Egypt, and that we have found, pretty amazingly preserved. And that they have reconstructed and given you so you can see. There we visited. This is one of the Valley of the Sphinxes. My apologies for the Duke fans here, but Brad and I put on our Carolina hats and pointed to the Rams there. Some of what we saw were depictions of this should bring to mind Pharaoh and the chariots and this was part of a longer wall that was telling the story of Pharaoh of a Pharaoh going to Israel and conquering there. I took a picture of this because this is now in the south of Egypt in Luxor, and in the Karnak. I think this was in the Karnak Temple complex. And this building, pretty amazingly, they measured it, and it is the exact dimensions of the tabernacle as described in the book of Exodus, right? So you have a building that's been found in the south of Egypt, which is the exact dimensions, right, for the construction of the tabernacle. And it gives you a sense of the way in which the Bible again was in having the Israelites construct a tabernacle was probably working out of the Egyptian context for how to construct a holy space. There's a beautiful sacred pool, and some more from the complex. This was a fun thing. Everybody was walking around. People decided to walk around this structure as part of their visit. Not exactly sure what the walking around meant, but
I think
fun
it
to
was
see
for
people
seven.
interact
You,
that
you
way.
did it like
We visit,
7 times, and it was 7 years of good luck, or so. It was something about luck, that,
yeah,
yeah.
right,
We
7,
didn't do
right.
it, but we watched the people do it. Yeah.
I got a video. We also visited this temple complex at night, and I think there's thousands and thousands of sphinxes that connect these two areas, or this temple complex to the Nile, and you can see just uh, amazing, uh, amazing view. We tried to get up and go ballooning in the morning. We were going to do a hot air balloon, but the weather wasn't right. This was us waiting, hoping. You can see our hot air balloon laid out behind us, but it was not to be. And to get there, we actually had to take a little boat across the Nile. So that's what the Nile looks like with its reeds. One more example of the Egyptian background. So this is a hieroglyph, and the way that this works is that when you die, you are mummified, and then they take your heart out. And on the left-hand side, can you see my cursor on the left-hand side? There's a scale, okay, and on the left-hand side is your heart. And on the right-hand side, there's these, I guess these are feathers of some sort. And they read a list, essentially a list of confessions. Either I did do this good thing or I didn't do this bad thing. And if you're telling the truth enough times, right, you did enough good things, then your heart, then your heart remains light. But if you have to lie too many times, your heart gets heavy. And if your heart gets heavy, then the god Anubis comes and basically eats your heart, and you don't get to go into the afterworld. In the Bible, when it says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, one of the verbs that it uses is hichbadati, which means also made his heart heavy. And so what that probably means is that God is making Pharaoh's heart heavy, so that he's not going to get into the afterlife, right? And so there's a whole Egyptian background to the words of the Bible that you can understand once you see something like this and sort of understand the Egyptian background to it, right? And this is we went to the Valley of Kings. Absolutely extraordinary. What you are seeing is a tunnel into far into the tomb. This is underground. Some of the tunnels go as far as 1.5 football fields into the mountain. And this color that you're seeing, right, is the original paint. It is 4,000 years old, 3,500, 4,000, 4,500 years old. The color still there, and you can see how elaborately these tombs were all decorated. And this gives you a sense of the landscape, right? That it's completely dry. It's a barren mountain. Obviously, these entrances were not, and the walls and stuff didn't exist, and that they would cover these up. And most of them were found by tomb robbers. The King Tut's tomb, we have it because essentially, I think I have a picture of this. So this is King Tut's tomb. And the reason that we have the contents of it, it was missed. And the reason it was missed is because you can see up here, there's another tomb above it. And essentially what happened is they said, oh, this is where, here's the tomb, it's on the top level. And they didn't think that there might be a tomb below it. And so it was actually missed until the beginning of the 20th century, or the late 19th century, when a little boy who was part of the excavation discovered, he said, oh, there's some more steps down here. And he essentially discovered the entrance to the tomb. But this is inside. There are 15, 20 different tombs sort of all around this valley. And I've just taken some close-ups of some of the hieroglyphics. Included in the hieroglyphics, you remember how I told you the Egyptian background? What happens to the Egyptians? They are drowned in the sea. In Egyptian folklore, drowning was actually a noble death. And so here, these are, this is obviously water and a depiction of people drowning. And the Bible was probably saying, hey, if you think that drowning is a noble way to die, Pharaoh, we're happy to do that for you, right? So God drowns the Pharaoh and the Egyptians in the sea. And here you have a hieroglyph, right, of obviously people drowning. There's Amy Ripps climbing down into one of the tombs, and just you can get a sense of how you go down and it keeps on going. We saw this gorgeous, amazing temple complex. I'm going to scoot forward. We had a night on the Nile. We had a beautiful Nile cruise. So this was our boat, and went out. We took some pictures. There's Sabina, right? Getting a nice sunset. You can see this was our little buffet that we had, very yummy. In the museum, so we then went back up to Cairo and we went to the Old Egyptian Museum. And in the Old Egyptian Museum, I took a picture of this because these are earrings. And if you remember in the scene describing the making of the golden calf, it says that the people took the earrings and the nose rings out of their ears, and it was melted down. And here you have rings, right? Earrings, again, from the time of the Exodus, right? And from Egypt, right? So you really get a sense of what it probably looked like, right? The sorts of things that the Israelites may have been carrying with us. On our tour, we had not only Gary Rensburg, but there was a parallel tour happening. And so there was another scholar of Egyptology. And we got 3 lectures with Gary and 2 with Jim Hoffmeyer. He was sort of explaining how in one of the lectures, the Exodus toponyms are authentic and tested in 19th century dynasty texts. And so, we got a chance to learn about some of those with him. On Shabbat morning, we went over to the Old Egyptian Museum, and one of the things that's there is the Merneptah stela. We did not have a Torah reading. As you can imagine, it was not easy to read Torah in Cairo. But in the Old Egyptian Museum, Gary showed us the Merneptah stela. And I think a little bit later on, I have some better pictures. Hold on, I'll come back to that in a second. But essentially, in the bottom part of it, if you can see where my cursor is, there's a part that's like a little bit darker than the rest. I think because it's, it probably was touched a little more. But you essentially have what I talked to Jack Sasson, not all scholars, but what some or maybe many scholars believe is the oldest mention of the people of Israel. And this stela actually dates to prior to the time of the Bible, right? So you have the oldest, and so we were reading, we weren't hearing Torah, but on a Shabbat morning in Egypt to be looking at the oldest written reference to the people of Israel that exists in human history was pretty extraordinary. Later that night, Gary gave a lecture, and I'll just play a little clip of it where he explained how the hieroglyphics work. Can you hear my sound when I do these videos or no? Can you hear the sound or?
No sound.
No sound? Okay. Hold on.
And in Egyptian,
No sound?
Yeah, now.
it's the bit of breath that you hear between Yisrael. In other words, in Semitic languages, you cannot have two vowels together. It doesn't exist like we can do in English. You have to have a.
I'm not going to do the whole thing, but
called the aleph in Hebrew, Arabic, etc. Egyptian doesn't have an L sound, so when they got to the end of the word Israel, they had to use the R sound again. Everybody see that? Paying attention? That's the R sound. So this gives us Yisrael. It's like Japanese. There's no L in Japanese. You have to use R sounds if you're writing.
all right, so you got it. You got a sense of that. Okay, I'm in Cairo, and I know we're close to the to an hour, so I'm going to scoot through the rest of this. But in Cairo, we went to a Coptic church again to associated with Saint Mark. Beautiful church with a very interesting history. In the Copt tradition, there is a tradition of actually having a tattoo of the cross that this little girl shared, and actually when we wanted to go into the church, sometimes you would just sort of my tour guide would share that tattoo that sort of indicated, yeah, I'm a Copt Christian. And we visited, and this was kind of the end of our trip. We visited the Ben Ezra synagogue. The Ben Ezra synagogue goes back to the 10th, 11th century. It was the synagogue of Maimonides. This is here you can get a sense of the inside and the prayer stand. I'm going to, let's see, do I have a closer picture? Yeah. So I'm going to read this to you. It says, Agada Befi Toshvei Ha'ir, which means this is a story or a tradition in the mouths of the residents of the city. It is told Tizaper Ki b'makom hazeh, because in this place Hitpalel Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom. Moses, our teacher, prayed. Zeh katuv b'Torah, and it's written in the Torah. What does it say in the Torah? Vayetze Moshe et ha'ir. Moshe left the city. Vayifros kapav el Adonai, and spread out his hands to Adonai. I think this says Vikibel biyadam or something like that. And Kiba makom hazeh haitat filato, because in this place was his prayer, right? And it's, obviously you would not have a verse about Moses leaving the city and holding his hands up to God and praying, at the prayer stand anywhere else in the world except for Cairo, except for, we're somewhere else in Egypt. So it's a very, I just thought that was a really neat aspect of the synagogue. This is taken from down below, facing up, and the behind the fence is the women's section. It's the women's balcony, and that hole up there was essentially is the Cairo Geniza. The Cairo Geniza is the most important collection of documents that were really ever found in terms of understanding not only the Judaism of certainly of the Middle Ages of Cairo, incredible find, and discovered and brought back to Cambridge and the Jewish Theological Seminary by Solomon Schechter. They wouldn't let us up there. We did sneak in a little prayer service, As we said the prayer service, they hushed us, but we finished our Kaddish, and then you can see this beautiful synagogue. Here's the picture of me in front of where the words Am Yisrael are written in hieroglyphics, and Gary sort of leading down and explaining that to me. So I've done the best that I can to share, but it was really an extraordinary trip. It was a great adventure for all of us. Does anybody else who was on the trip, or Salwa, do you want to just share anything else before we finish up?
That was a beautiful, beautiful presentation, and I really wish I was with you, but I am so glad you had a great time.
Thank you. And I say publicly thank you to you for all of the many little things you did to help me have my adventure in Alexandria and to feel at home. I think I'll just I'll wrap up. I did a teaching at the Forest at Duke and out at Galloway Ridge as well. I did a lunch and learn about the history of Jews in Egypt, and as I said, it's very interesting. According to Jewish law, you're not permitted. Jews are not supposed to go and live in Egypt anymore, and yet we know that Jews returned after in the first exile. Most of the Jews went to Babylon, but Jeremiah the prophet actually went to Egypt. And he was there. That was in, around the time of 586 BCE. We know that Jews were there during the Persian period. They're in Elephantine, which is in the south of Egypt. We know that Jews were part of Alexandria from the very early days. And we know, obviously, that Maimonides was there in the Middle Ages. And so it is not an exaggeration to say there's no Egyptian history without Jews. For me, it was very humbling. First of all, I just had a great experience in Alexandria and in other parts of Egypt of davening facing northeast, right? Northeast, sort of looking at the Mediterranean and going, when we to get to Israel, you just go, turn right and follow, and then the coastline, will turn. But also, the last thing I'll share is, we say in our prayers each day, Tekah b'shofar gadol lecheritenu. We ask God to bring together the exiles from the four corners of the world and to bring us back to Israel. And there's something obviously very hopeful about that in terms of unity and being together. But there's also, I think there's a shadow side to that, which is that, there's a tremendous blessing of Jews being part of the world. There was I had a lot of sadness in thinking about the long history of the Jewish people in Egypt, and the way in which that, seems to have come to an end. And all I can say is that, life is long and perhaps as history unfolds, things, there may be communities that return and rebuild Jewish life again. So we will see. But for now, to go and visit Egypt was to learn a lot about Judaism. It was to have a special trip with people in our community, and it was just a great blessing. So thanks for coming out to look at the slides.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you.